This morning, I'm going to talk about the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance. And this is a fairly short work by Dogen. First, I'll give you the facts. In Japanese, it's the Bodhisattva Shisho Ho, and it can be found in the book Moon in a Dewdrop. The translation I'm using is by Lou Richmond and Kazuaki Tanahashi. There's another translation by Nishiyama and Stevens that I'll refer to from time to time. And they call it On the 4 Exemplary Acts of a Bodhisattva. So Dogen wrote this in 1243 when he was about 43 years old, and it's written for a lay audience. And he didn't include it in the primary version of the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, since that was written for monks. His source for this was the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra. So this is from the Mahayana literature. The idea of the Bodhisattva, and indeed everything about Bodhisattvas, appeared a few hundred years after the Buddha's death. And Dogen doesn't define Bodhisattva. He assumes we know what it is. It's an enlightenment being. A Bodhisattva is a being who does all of the work to attain Buddhahood, but doesn't choose to enter into nirvana until all beings are saved. So it's a highly realized being who puts off their own bliss in order to serve others. And it begins, the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance are giving, kind speech, beneficial action, and identity action. And I'm basically going to talk about the first one, giving, but I'll just mention the other 3 up front here. The second is kind speech. Offer words of loving care. Those who hear of your kind speech will be deeply touched. They will never forget it. The third is beneficial action, which is skillfully to benefit all classes of sentient beings, that is, to care about their distant and near future and to help them by using skillful means. So the Bodhisattva engages in kind speech and in action. And the fourth is identity action, which is non-difference from self, non-difference from others. So it's acting in such a way that you identify with others and others identity with you. There is no separation. And the Nishiyama and Stevens translation calls this manifesting sympathy. So part 1 about giving comes first because it's considered foundational, and I'm going to walk you through this. And it begins, giving means non-greed. Right away, I think Dogen is challenging our conventional view a bit when he says that giving is non-greed, because conventionally, we think of giving as one person transferring something to another person. But if giving is not greed or is non-greed, then giving means not holding on to something. So there's a difference between me handing you something and me holding something lightly and saying, I don't need to keep this. And saying, I don't need to keep this means there doesn't have to be a particular recipient of the giving. So the archetypal act of me giving is not me handing you a present, it's me saying, anything I have, I'm not going to cling to. And if it goes away, or if I give it away, or you take it, it's okay. And if I keep it, that's okay too, because I can keep it in a non-clinging manner. And it's typical of Dogen, I think, that when we read him, we have to abandon our attachment to our ideas of what words mean. There are always translation problems, and we have to be wary about the baggage that English words carry. But there's also his tendency to allow the meaning of words to be fluid. And he may use a word to mean a different thing from paragraph to paragraph, or even sentence to sentence. And when we read Dogen, if we don't hang on to our fixed views of what words mean, that's a kind of giving in itself. And I think that's what he's asking of us. And you'll see that later on, he also uses the word giving in a conventional way. He goes on, non-greed means not to covet. So do not covet, do not be attached, do not grasp, because grasping causes suffering. Not to covet means not to curry favor, he continues. Nishiyama and Stevens say don't grovel or flatter. Even if you govern the 4 continents, you should always convey the correct teaching with non-greed. So the 4 continents in Buddhist cosmology represent the whole world. So even if you rule the entire world, you should convey the Buddha's teaching without greed. So giving is not just about giving the Buddha's teaching, it's about what's in your heart when you do it. Do it without attachment. Don't do it in order to feel good or to feel powerful. Attachment will cause suffering. If you're doing it because you're attached to the good feelings that might come, you're likely to give in an unskillful way because you're trying to get something there. And you could actually end up hurting the person that you're trying to give to or hurting yourself. And he continues, it, meaning giving, is to give away unneeded belongings to someone you don't know, to offer flowers blooming on a distant mountain to the Tathagata, or again, to offer treasures you had in your former life to sentient beings. So in this sentence, he's using giving in both the conventional and the non-conventional way. To give away unneeded belongings to someone else whom you don't know is to give in the conventional sense. You have something and you give it to something. But to offer flowers on a distant mountain to the Tathagata, which is the Buddha, is quite different. Because you don't really have the flowers that are on the distant mountain. You don't possess them. They're all the way over there, and yet you're giving them away. How do you give away something that you don't really have? Well, you give it away by not being attached to it, by not trying to keep them for yourself in some way, by not trying to possess them with your mind. And there's an example, I think, of this, of trying to possess things with your mind that I've used before. And it has to do with trying to hang on to the moment. And so many times I've seen a very special, fleeting moment occur. It may be when a wild animal appears, briefly. Or it may be when someone's teenager walks across the stage and gets their diploma. And I see the folks present who obviously value the moment very much, and what are they doing? Are they fully there experiencing it? No, they're taking a picture of it. So rather than experiencing the moment, they're putting something between themselves and the moment in an effort to save it for later. Now that's okay, and I've done it myself, and sometimes you do want a record, but it makes me a little sad sometimes when we get into the mindset that we kind of do this over and over, like, oh, save it for later, save it for later, save it for later. And we can miss some of the dearest moments of our life because we're trying to save it for another time. And this is just a good metaphor for what happens in our minds when we look at something like a beautiful sunset. We're so busy thinking, oh, how can I remember this? Or how can I find this again sometime? Or how can I somehow find the essence of this, that we can't really experience it? And that's a kind of attachment that is so habitual that we don't even see it until maybe one day we wake up to it. So each thing we see, a beautiful sky, a flock of sparrows, this maple tree behind me, may be subject to the intervention of our busy mind. We classify, we rate our experience, we comment on our experience, we wonder what we will remember about it, and maybe ask how we can get some more of it. And these are all stories that are coming in. But letting it come in and letting it go and not letting the stories begin, that's a different thing. We so want to hold on to things, but it's such a joy, moment to moment, to fully let something go. And we learn to do this by doing Zazen, because that's what we're doing. We're not hanging on to a thought or building on it. We're letting it go, letting it go, letting it go. And something comes and it's unpleasant. We don't dwell on it, we let it go. And sometimes it comes and it feels like the most beautiful thing we've ever experienced. And we can completely let that go too. It's hard. We so want to hang on to it. But we can do that. We can let even the most beautiful things go. And that is a profound kind of giving. That's offering flowers blooming on a distant mountain to the Tathagata. And I think that's such a beautiful image. I can offer anything. And this can be part of my practice. I can do this consciously. I'm watching the wind in the maple tree back here. And I can think, oh, that is so beautiful. And I want to keep it. I want to keep the memory of that. But then I can say, no, I offer the leaves in the wind to the Buddha, or I offer it to the universe, or I offer it to my loved ones. I give the thing that I love the most, and then I'm ready for the next thing that comes. And if I can let go, that next thing is going to be beautiful too. That's the great beauty of it. If you let it go, it comes back, but always in a different form. Never in the form you expected, always new. But isn't that better? Instead of trying to get back what you had before, you're open to the new thing. So I can do this as a practice. I can go through my day offering everything I see to the Buddha. And if I do it long enough consciously, it'll probably start to just happen. And I don't need that little intervening instruction to myself to let it go. I'll just let it go. I'll just let it go. So continuing with that sentence, to offer treasures you had in your former life to sentient beings. To offer treasures you had in your former life to sentient beings. Wow. Again, he's talking about offering things we don't really have. Treasures we had in a former life. How can we give away something we don't have? Well, again, it's about not being attached to things in our mind. New paragraph. When you leave the way to the way, you attain the way. That so much sounds like Dogen, doesn't it? Nishiyama and Stevens say, when we leave the way to the way, we realize the way. So whether we attain the way or realize the way, this broadens out the idea of giving a bit, I think. We're no longer explicitly talking about a physical transfer or even about a mental practice of non-attachment, but we're talking about letting things be in general. And if we take this idea of giving all the way, this idea of non-covetousness all the way, we're just allowing everything to be. We're leaving the way to be the way. And there's no problem anymore. There's no difference between me and the way. and that allows me to be me, and that allows you to be you. That's a logical contradiction, but both are true. You and the way are the same, and when you see that, you and the way can each be what they are. At the time of attaining the way is always left to the way. When treasure is left just as treasure, it becomes giving. So we offer things up to the Buddha and we let them be what they are. Life is nothing but giving, and giving is freedom. You give yourself to yourself and others to others. So things don't disappear. You still exist, but you exist without attachment. You don't get confused as to where you begin and another person ends. You don't get so wrapped up in them that your desires affect your relationship with them. You act in their best interests, not yours. You have good boundaries because you give, because you exist without attachment. And he goes on, the power of the causal relations of giving reaches to divas, human beings, and even enlightened sages. He's starting to talk a little bit about the benefits of giving here. So the power of causal relations. In a footnote, it says that causal relations means that all events are the result of prior causes and conditions, and all events serve as causes and conditions for future events. So giving is a cause, it creates a condition, and Dogen is telling us that the impact of giving can be profound. In the conventional sense, if I take the time to buy a card and write something nice in it and mail it to someone who is sick, that can have a big impact. A smile can have a big impact. A decision not to try to hang on to the flowers on the distant mountain can have a profound impact. If I do that, I'm changed. I am in that moment kinder and freer. And I'm more likely to carry that over into another moment. And you may sense that when I talk to you next. You may be influenced. The influence can spread to all things, to divas, which are celestial beings, and other humans, and enlightened ones. The enlightened ones need your help too. New paragraph. Buddha said, when a person who practices giving goes to an assembly, people take notice. You should know that the mind of such a person communicates subtly with others. So a person who has a very strong practice sends out a vibe. It may be a very subtle vibe and you may not realize it's affecting you, but it is. Nishiyami and Stevens translate it this way. When a donor comes into a monastic assembly, others admire that person right from the start. You should realize that they have tacitly understood the heart of the person. Therefore, he continues, give even a phrase or a verse of the truth. It will be a wholesome seed for this and other lifetimes. So even if you can't give very much, if you can't give the Buddha's whole truth, just give a phrase, just give a verse, give the tiniest thing. Giving is so powerful that that tiny thing will be a wholesome seed for this and other lifetimes. Maybe today you're not up for giving the flowers on the distant mountain. Maybe you just can't do that today, but still you can give something. You can give your aspiration to do so, or you can give your understanding that you just can't do it today. It's good, whatever you can give. If you say, I can't give, that's a kind of giving. Say it out loud. Give your truth. And he goes on, give your valuables, even a penny or a blade of grass, It will be a wholesome root for this and other lifetimes. The truth can turn into valuables. Valuables can turn into the truth. So I can't give is the truth, and you can give the truth. And when you do that, you've turned not giving into giving. Just as the truth, we might say to ourselves at a low point, I am utterly bereft. Something about stating that truth can start us on a different path that comes to pure joy. Because we start with the truth. We make that readjustment. We abandon our stories. This is it. I can't give. Okay, that's just the truth. Now a new paragraph. A king gave his beard as medicine to cure his retainer's disease. That refers to a little story about an emperor who cut off his beard and burned it and gave it to someone to cure their disease. That's what the doctor ordered. A child offered sand to the Buddha and became King Ashoka in a later birth. So the Buddha and Ananda were out begging one day, and they came upon these two children playing with sand. And one of them was so taken by the Buddha's deportment that he offered a handful of sand into the Buddha's begging bowl. That's all he had. They were playing in the sand. And that's so sweet. I mean, can't you imagine a child doing that in all sincerity, giving something that was really valuable to him? It doesn't have to be grand what you give. And there was so much merit in this deed that the child grew up to be King Ashoka, the greatest king in the history of India. They were not greedy for reward, but only shared what they could. To launch a boat or build a bridge is an act of giving. So just doing our day-to-day work, whatever it is, whether we're driving a truck or designing a website or teaching music, that's giving too. Then, if you study giving closely, you see that to accept a body and to give up the body are both giving. Okay, that kind of stopped me at first. If you study giving closely, you see that to accept a body and to give up the body are both giving. I think maybe we're talking about life and death here. I think that accepting birth is an act of giving, and ready to leave this world when the time comes is an act of giving as well. But that's true of every little birth and death as well. We're always being born and we're always dying as we create ourselves again and again, and as we abandon those creations. So this is about accepting impermanence. Accepting impermanence is giving. Or in the other translation, accepting oneself and letting go of oneself are both offerings. So maybe accepting form and accepting emptiness are both offerings. Willing to be Ted and willing to be not Ted are both offerings. That may be it also. Then, making a living and producing things can be nothing other than giving. And remember, he's talking to a lay audience here with a very important point that making your living is not a distraction from your practice. It is your practice. To leave flowers to the wind, to leave birds to the seasons are also acts of giving. Then, King Ashoka was able to offer enough food for hundreds of monks with half a mango. People who practice giving should understand that King Ashoka thus proved the greatness of giving. Didn't Jesus do something like that too? So this story again illustrates how a small act of kindness can become very large. Not only should you make an effort to give, but also be mindful of every opportunity to give. So what are our opportunities to give? If you're isolating, with another person or with your family or with your animals. You have hundreds of opportunities each day to give. Do you take advantage of them? If you're isolating alone, you have hundreds of opportunities to give, but they're not so obvious. Can you find them? Continuing, you are born into this present life because of the merit of giving in the past. Buddha said, if you are to practice giving to yourself, how much more so to your parents, wife, and children? Let's change that to parents, spouse, and children. Therefore, you should know that to give to yourself is a part of giving. So this part I really like, the importance of giving to those people around you, and remembering that giving to yourself is a part of giving. Because as I've so often said, we have such a tendency to be hard on ourselves. It's all about giving away everything we have, and yet we can give to ourselves. We can give those flowers on the distant mountain to the Tathagata, and the Tathagata includes us. To give to your family is also giving. Even when you give a particle of dust, you should rejoice in your own act because you correctly transmit the merit of all Buddhas, and for the first time practice an act of a Bodhisattva. So when you give, you transmit the merit of all Buddhas. There's that word transmit. We tend to think of transmission as something that we want from a teacher. But we ourselves can be the transmitters. We can transmit the merit of all Buddhas. And any act of a Bodhisattva is for the first time. It's always new because giving is giving everything up, and we can never know where that will lead. And it can't lead to the same place twice. It's always new. The mind of a sentient being is difficult to change. Tell me about it. I've been on Facebook. I hear the screaming. I have friends across the political spectrum. You should keep on changing the minds of sentient beings from the first moment that they have one particle to the moment that they attain the way. So if we're working on changing someone's mind, from hatred to kindness, we start with one particle, one common ground, one kind thought. Maybe we start with how we all love our children. Maybe we start there. This should be started by giving, is the next line. It's so hard to change someone's mind, but start by giving. Start by giving them your attention. Start by listening. And then, for this reason, giving is the first of the 6 paramitas. So giving, or dana, comes before discipline, patience, effort, meditation, and wisdom, because giving is fundamental. And now, last paragraph. Mind is beyond measure. Things given are beyond measure. Moreover, in giving, mind transforms the gift, and the gift transforms mind. I'll just read that again. Mind is beyond measure. Things given are beyond measure. Moreover, in giving, mind transforms the gift, and the gift transforms mind. So, have a little faith about giving. Put your heart into a small act, mailing the card, offering a bit of sand, offering one particle. You cannot know the effects. A small act may save the world. Your good intentions add to the gift, and the gift adds to your good intentions. And that's the end of the part on giving. But there's one more thing I'd like to address, take a bit of a turn here in my talk, and I'd like to address a difficult question, which occurred to me while I was writing this and thinking about the world today. And that question is, how do you give when you're depleted? Because if I put myself in the place of listening to my own talk, part of me is like, well, that's cool, I get it, give continuously. And part of me is like, that's really not what I want to hear today. I'm supposed to give and give and give, and frankly, I'm a little tired. I'm having a hard week. I need somebody to give to me. So why should I give? And I think that's a fair question. And to answer it, I'd like to go back to what I said when I read the first line of the giving section. I said that giving means non-greed, and that this challenges our conventional view of giving. It doesn't have to be transferring something. It's not holding on to something. And later in the talk, Dogen talked about both giving in the non-conventional sense and the conventional sense. Giving the flowers in your mind to the Buddha, non-conventional sense. Building a bridge or giving to your family, conventional sense. And giving in the conventional sense may be hard these days. We always aspire to it, but we may sometimes have to limit it. There are times when we have to cut back and look after ourselves. That's okay. And actually, we need to do that to be effective. We can't become too depleted. But giving in the non-conventional sense, we can always do that. No matter how down we are, no matter how depleted, we can still give the flowers on the distant mountain. Remember, give even a phrase or a verse of the truth. Giving is non-attachment. If we're depleted, we can give our depletion. If we're tired, we can give our exhaustion. If we're scared, we can give our fear. This is what I have. This is my truth. I am giving my truth. This is what I have for the Buddha. Tired, exhausted me. The Buddha will love this gift, just as he loved of sand. And sometimes things can turn when you offer things up. And I'll tell you how that happened for me in a small way, just a couple of days ago. So Friday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I went down to the kitchen. And the first thing I did was open the door to let in a little fresh air because we have a door that connects to the outside from our kitchen. And we've had a really bad heat wave in Minnesota. At least I think it's been bad. Really hot, really humid. And I don't function very well in hot weather. And the heat had built up in the house overnight. So I made a cup of coffee and I sat at the counter and I felt the cool air coming in and I began to write about the previous day because I wanted to sort things out. And Thursday had not been a great day. It started out really nice. I had 3 dokasans in a row. Those are one-to-one meetings with a student. And, these were remote meetings and I connected with people and I got to study some texts and I got to give and receive. And one of the things I studied with a student was the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance. And that was good. That was a good morning. But that's about all I had in me for that day. And maybe it was just the heat. But sometimes things kind of build up and they wear you down. And I was writing about some tough challenges I have as a Zen teacher. And I wrote about how we're about 5.5 months into isolation now. And that's almost half a year. And it could easily be another half a year. And then there's baseball. It may seem trivial with all that's going on, but hey, we find comfort where we can, right? And baseball is just not working at all. Don't get me started on the rule changes and the phony crowd sounds and all of that. So the door was still open and it started to rain a little bit. And I heard the sound of the rain and I continued to write. And there were all these things. There was what happened in Kenosha, which I think is on all of our minds. There was how Jacob Blake was chained to his bed after he was shot. There was how the police appeared to buddy up to this guy, this young guy who showed up with a semi-automatic rifle, and he went on and he killed 2 people. And then watching the news on Thursday afternoon about the looting in Minneapolis that happened overnight, which was understandable how it happened, but not helpful. And that triggered something in me. And I know it triggered something in me because I just sat there and I cried watching my TV the way I did back in May. And I know this is not about me, and I know that others have it much worse than me, but I think we're all, you know, still a little traumatized. So I was writing about all of this, and then the rain started to come really heavy. And I just listened to it, and I took in the sound of it and the smell of it, and it just seemed so nice. It was nice to be sitting there and to be writing, and I knew we were going to get a break from the heat now, and we'd get better sleeping weather. And I thought of what I had studied in that Dokusan, and I thought, I can offer this up. I can offer the rain. I've got what I got. I don't got any more. I can offer the rain. I can offer these deep talks that I have with people. I can offer the truth of my honesty, and I can offer little things throughout the day. These are all for the Buddha. And so that's what I wrote. And then I wrote this talk. And then the paper came. I brought the paper in and I opened it. And I turned to the baseball section first because, despite my objections, that's the easiest part for me to take these days. And it said that the Minnesota Twins were united in their decision not to play in protest about Kenosha. And I think that whole front page of the sports section was about athletes protesting about racism in one way or another. And I don't want to exalt professional athletes too much. I mean, because there's so many who have given so much for social justice for so long. But this, I thought, was a really positive sign. A sign that consciousness about race is really penetrating more and more levels of society, and more people are willing to do something about it. And Kathy came down and she read the paper and she saw that and she cried because it gave her hope, she said. So maybe baseball is working this year after all. Maybe baseball is working better than it has in a long time. And I really enjoyed not watching that Twins game that they didn't have. And I enjoyed knowing that it wasn't on. And we'll give that game up to the Buddha. And that's just one kind of small thing, but there are a lot of things going on. And I'd just like to mention that tonight, there's an event. There's a multi-faith candlelight vigil for Jacob Blake and Black Lives Matter. And that's happening at the George Floyd Memorial tonight at 8:46 p.m. And it's sponsored by various religious organizations, including MZMC. And Ben Connolly will be there and he'll be saying a few words. And I'm going to go. And as you may know, I've been very, very cautious about going out into crowds and things like that. But I think it's time. Things have turned for me a little bit, and I can do that thing. So I feel good about that. You know, we can give what we have, even if we're depleted. We can practice this daily. We can practice it repeatedly throughout our day. We can offer up the moment we're in, and things given are beyond measure.